It's still dark outside. Your alarm is set for 6:30. Your eyes are open, staring at the ceiling, and you already know, without checking, that you're early. You reach over, and there it is. 6:26. 4 minutes. Not 30. Not an hour. 4 minutes on a night where nothing woke you. No noise, no light, no dream that startled you awake. You were just asleep, and now you're not. And somehow your body picked almost the exact same window it always seems to pick. This isn't a one-time fluke either. You can probably think of dozens of mornings like this. Different alarms, different weeks, different levels of exhaustion the night before. And somehow, almost every time, you surface a few minutes ahead of the sound that was supposed to wake you. So here's the actual question worth asking. If nothing external woke you up, what did? The easy answer is that it's a coincidence, that you just happen to guess right often enough that it feels meaningful, the same way you notice every time a coin landed on heads and forget the times it didn't. That explanation is comfortable. It's also wrong, or at least badly incomplete, and the actual research on this is stranger than a coincidence and more specific than most people expect. Your body isn't guessing. It's tracking something with a level of precision that looks less like luck and more like a clock, counting down toward a number you told it in advance. To understand how, you have to start with the fact that you have an actual clock inside your skull, a physical one, not a metaphor. It's a cluster of roughly 20,000 neurons sitting just above where your optic nerves cross, called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and sleep scientists refer to it, without much exaggeration, as your body's master clock. This structure runs on a roughly 24-hour cycle, your circadian rhythm, and it coordinates far more than just sleep. Body temperature, hunger, digestion, hormone release. All of it gets synchronized against this one internal timer, adjusted daily by cues like light hitting your eyes and, just as importantly, by the routines you repeat. That word, routine, matters more than it sounds like it should. Your master clock isn't static. It learns. If you wake up around the same time often enough, your circadian rhythm doesn't just tolerate that pattern. It actively prepares your body for it in advance. And the preparation isn't subtle once you know what to look for. In the hour or so before your usual wake time, your core body temperature starts climbing. Melatonin, the hormone that helped put you to sleep in the first place, starts dropping, and cortisol, the hormone most people only associate with stress, begins rising well before your eyes open, priming your nervous system for alertness. Sleep researchers call this specific rise the cortisol awakening response. And by the time your alarm is actually due to go off, your body has often already been quietly transitioning out of sleep for 20 or 30 minutes. Which means when you wake up a few minutes early, you're not beating your alarm by luck. You're catching the tail end of a process your body already started without asking you. But here's the part that turns this from a mildly interesting fact into something genuinely strange, and it comes from a study that's been quietly cited in sleep research for over 2 decades. In 1999, a team of researchers led by Jan Born at the University of Lübeck in Germany ran an experiment designed to isolate one very specific question. Was the rise in wake-up hormones driven purely by your body's internal clock ticking along on its own schedule, or could it be shaped by something closer to expectation itself? To test this, they told a group of volunteers they'd be woken at 9 in the morning. Then, without warning them, the researchers woke some of them 3 hours early instead, at 6. If the hormone surge was purely mechanical, tied only to elapsed sleep time, or the body's fixed daily rhythm, waking someone early should have caught their system off guard. Cortisol levels still low, still deep in the pattern built for a 9 o'clock finish. That is not what happened. In the participants who believed they'd be allowed to sleep until 9 but were secretly woken at 6, hormone levels tied to waking had already begun climbing roughly an hour before their actual surprise wake-up time. Their bodies weren't just tracking elapsed sleep. They were tracking an expectation, one that hadn't even been announced, to the researchers' own predicted schedule, and preparing for it in advance. Sit with what that actually means for a second. Your endocrine system, the same network of glands and hormones that governs stress, metabolism, and alertness, appears able to anticipate a planned event before it happens, using nothing but the intention you set the night before. You don't wake up before your alarm because your body randomly guesses well. You wake up before your alarm because some part of you, well below conscious thought, took the number you set last night seriously and started building toward it hours in advance. This is also why the effect gets stronger, not weaker, with consistency. If you wake at wildly different times every day, your master clock never gets a clean signal to anchor its predictions to, and you end up depending almost entirely on the alarm itself to drag you out of sleep, sometimes out of a deep stage where waking feels less like surfacing and more like being yanked, leaving you groggy for the next half hour, a state researchers call sleep inertia. But if your wake time is roughly stable, day after day, your body has something reliable to anticipate, and the whole transition gets smoother, earlier, and quieter. The people who wake up 2 or 3 minutes ahead of their alarm, feeling clear-headed, aren't lucky. They've accidentally trained a genuinely precise internal system by doing the single most boring thing available to them, waking up around the same time on purpose. There's a flip side to this that's worth naming honestly, because it explains the mornings this system seems to misfire. Anticipation doesn't only mean a scheduled wake-up time. It can also mean anxiety about a task waiting for you the moment you open your eyes, an early flight, a difficult meeting, a deadline you're dreading. The same hormonal machinery that quietly primes you for a routine 6:30 alarm can also get triggered by stress itself, because cortisol doesn't distinguish neatly between healthy anticipation and dread. On nights like that, your nervous system behaves less like a patient clock and more like an overcautious guard, checking the exits early and often, which is why people report snapping awake at 4 a.m., hearts already racing, fully convinced they've overslept on the one morning they most needed uninterrupted rest. Same mechanism, different trigger, much rougher landing. It's worth asking, briefly, why a system this precise would exist in the first place, rather than something cruder that just responded to noise and light. The honest answer is that nobody can run a controlled experiment on prehistoric sleep. So anything here is a reasonable hypothesis rather than settled fact. But researchers who study the evolution of human sleep patterns have pointed out that predictable anticipation of dawn, of a hunting window, of a moment when it made sense to already be alert rather than still deeply unconscious, would have carried a real survival advantage for a species that spent most of its history sleeping somewhere at least partially exposed. A body that could quietly start preparing for wakefulness ahead of the actual danger or opportunity, rather than reacting only after the fact, is the kind of trait natural selection tends to favor. Whether or not that specific story is the full explanation, the underlying tool, an internal clock, capable of anticipating a future moment and starting the shift toward alertness in advance, is clearly old and clearly useful, long before anyone needed it for a 6:30 commute. Which brings you back to tonight, and to whatever time you're planning to set your alarm for. When you decide on that number and let yourself fall asleep, you're not just setting a piece of hardware to make noise in the morning, you're handing a deadline to a system inside you that takes it more seriously than you'd expect. One that will spend the last hour of your sleep quietly raising your temperature, lowering the hormone that kept you under, and lifting the one that will pull you out, all before the alarm ever gets the chance to do its job. So, the next time you open your eyes in the dark, a few minutes ahead of schedule, with no sound and no reason you can point to, you'll know it wasn't chance, and it wasn't your imagination working overtime. It was a promise you made to yourself the night before, kept by a part of you that never actually went to sleep.